Hare Krishna. So it's a great privilege for us to welcome amongst us His Grace Siddhanta Prabhu. So सिद्धांत प्रभु शीला प्रभुपाद के कृपा पात्र शिष्य हैं. सिद्धांत प्रभु ने 1971 ईस्वी में इस्कॉन ज्वाइन किया था 1971. और मैं अभी सोच रहा हूँ कि मैं पैदा हुआ था 1972 में. तो बोलते हैं ना, तुम तो पैदा भी नहीं हुए थे एक्चुअली. तो प्रभु जी is so senior in the movement. 1971 he joined. 1974 he got initiated by Srila Prabhupada. He served in Denver, Colorado, USA. He was involved in book distribution. He was also involved in many services, including as a high school lecturer on the Vedic viewpoint. He had also done other services, many other services, including taking care of the Iskcon TV project, along with His Grace Narasimhananda Prabhu, his god brother. They produced such classics as the Acharya series. आप सबने देखा है Acharya series video? देखा नहीं तो अभी तो देखिए कम से कम. The Ramayana, Krishna puppet shows, the vegetarian documentary called Healthy, Wealthy and Wise. इसके अलावा उन्होंने एक बहुत सुंदर डॉक्यूमेंट्री भी किया था, Coming Back, Reincarnation in America. ऐसे बहुत सारे वीडियोस उन्होंने प्रोड्यूस किए हैं. अब लगभग कम से कम 32 साल से प्रभु जी हैज इंडिपेंडेंटली प्रोड्यूस्ड द प्रभुपाद मेमोरीज सीरीज. आप में से कितने भक्तों ने ये बुक्स पढ़े हैं? प्रभुपाद के मेमोरीज बुक्स जो हैं 5 वॉल्यूम्स में निकले हैं, बहुत ही कम है. मुझे लगता है अभी हिंदी में अनुवाद करना पड़ेगा, नहीं तो लोग पढ़ नहीं रहे हो. तो प्रभु जी के ये जो आज का सेशन में हम देखेंगे कि उसमें से बहुत सारे वीडियोस भी दिखाएंगे. प्रभु जी लेक्चर भी देंगे. देयर आर ओवर 400 वीडियो इंटरव्यूज. 400 वीडियो इंटरव्यूज. कंप्लीट सन्नाटा. बस इतना ही उत्साह. 400 इंटरव्यू. लाइफ में कभी 400 प्रॉपर डिसेबल्स इकट्ठा देखे हैं टीवी के अलावा? तो उतने लोगों के डायरेक्ट इंटरव्यूज हैं प्रभु जी ने कंपेल कराए हैं, संकलन किया है. तो इनमें जोर अधिकतर होता था कि शिष्यों को प्रभुपाद ने क्या शिक्षाएं दी, प्रभुपाद के क्या क्या वैष्णव लक्षण थे, वैष्णव गुण थे, वैष्णव क्वालिटीज जो बताते हैं, और उनके संग से जो प्राप्त हुए थे इनका था. और लगभग 95 अलग अलग वीडियोस निकले हैं. कुल मिलाकर 150 प्रेरणात्मक, शिक्षात्मक, दर्शन हेतु, दर्शन के आस्वादन हेतु उन्होंने बहुत सारे वीडियोस प्रोड्यूस किए हैं. अभी प्रभु जी 6वां वॉल्यूम, 6ठे खंड पर काम कर रहे हैं. 6th वॉल्यूम ऑफ प्रभुपाद मेमोरीज. विदाउट मच डिले, once again let us welcome His Grace Siddhanta Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. His Grace Siddhanta Prabhu की, जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की. जो भक्त हिंदी में सुनना ज्यादा पसंद करते हैं उनके लिए पीछे अनुवाद की व्यवस्था की गई है. इस ग्रेस बलि प्रसाद प्रभु अनुवाद कर रहे हैं, कृपया उसका आप लाभ उठा सकते हैं. हरे कृष्णा.
Hare Krishna. First we're going to hear Srila Prabhupada chant the Jai Radha Madhava prayers. With audio, God willing.
Kunna Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunna Bihari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodhanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yasodhanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Muspat Paramahansa Paribhrajagacharya Sikharesha Smadhati Dhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava ki jai Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur ki jai Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Lakshmi ki jai Shri Radha Krishna Bhog Gopinath Sam Kund Radha Kund Girivardhan ki jai Vrindavan Dham ki jai Navadvip Dham ki jai Ganga Mai की जय जमुना माई की जय गुरु द्वारका धाम की जय स्वामी तो भक्तविंद की जय और ग्लोरी श्री और ग्लोरी श्री थैंक यू वेरी मच
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So I want to thank everybody assembled here for coming and allowing me to speak and present some stories about Srila Prabhupada, because we know from the scriptures that Krishna is pleased when his pure devotee is glorified. So what we're going to present today are some sample stories from the memory series that I collected over the last 2 years, the COVID period. And so these are kind of the best we're going to get today. How many people are not aware of the Prabhupada memory series? Raise your hand. Okay. So, this is a preface. We had Chaitanya Charan. How many were here for Chaitanya Charan's Bhagavatam class? Brilliant class yesterday. Most people were not here, right? Okay, so he was speaking about the essence of oral histories, the necessity of having oral histories, specifically in reference to Lord Chaitanya. And the Goswamis writing down the histories and the stories and the qualities of Lord Chaitanya for our benefit. So it was a brilliant lecture, and I saw that it was Krishna's mercy that he actually gave an introduction to this presentation, which is about oral histories of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada exclaimed and told us that for the next 10,000 years, his books will be the law books. Correct? So he is also then our Shiksha Guru for the next 10,000 years, because he is presenting his philosophy to us. In the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, so many literatures that Prabhupada has presented. So having oral histories is essential to carry on our tradition, to know, first of all, what are the lessons that Prabhupada taught us, and what are the qualities of Srila Prabhupada that enable us to worship him and glorify him in the manner that we do. Srila Prabhupada is a person, not just the guru, which is heavy, sitting on the Vyasasana, and that's his position also, to teach us, giving us the straight, the sauce, as some would say, the absolute knowledge of Krishna philosophy handed down over so many years, 5,000 years, or before that it was simply spoken. So, in the lecture that Chaitanya Charan Prabhu gave yesterday, you mentioned that histories is something that we should look at in two ways. And the primary way that we're going to listen and realize the histories of Prabhupada is for two things: to learn the lessons, the knowledge that he has given us, and the qualities that Prabhupada exhibited while he was on the planet. So this will give us faith to know the qualities that Prabhupada had. And according to the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are 26 qualities of the Vaishnava. 26 qualities. This is how we can tell if someone is a Vaishnava, if they fit all of these qualities. Prabhupada was once doing an interview at a radio station in Gainesville, Florida, back in the early 70s. And the radio announcer, the host, was a little inimical, but finally Prabhupada convinced him that we are presenting the absolute truth and that we are Vaishnavas. And the man did not know what a Vaishnava meant, so he asked Prabhupada, what does the Vaishnava mean? And Prabhupada said, the definition of Vaishnava is that he is a perfect gentleman. And these 26 qualities of a perfect gentleman are there not only that we can judge Srila Prabhupada, that he had these 26 qualities, but we can also use that 26 qualities as a barometer for our own advancement. Am I becoming more tolerant? Am I becoming friendly? Am I becoming merciful? Am I making friends with everyone? You can read the 26 qualities in the scriptures, but the essence of these qualities is there for our benefit as well. Please, everyone, turn off your cell phones. That's me included. So, this project of going around the world and collecting the oral histories from Prabhupada's disciples is essential. We're seeing every day now Prabhupada disciples are leaving the planet. That's a law of nature. We know that Prabhupada has taught us that this is the fact of life. He didn't say taxes, but we know it's taxes and death. That's a for sure thing. There was an interesting story by a devotee, just as a side note before we get into today's video program, where there was a young devotee girl, about 11, 12 years old, in Vrindavan, and she accidentally took some medicine that she shouldn't have taken, and it was actually toxic. And so she was dying. And her mother and this Maji who told the story to me went to Prabhupada and said to Prabhupada, her daughter she's growing sick from this poison and she's dying and we don't know what to do. And we're just very sad. And what to do with this young girl? We don't know how to behave and how to treat her properly. She's dying, Prabhupada. And they were looking for some compassion from Prabhupada. Oh, you poor thing, yes, I'm so sorry to hear that. But Prabhupada said, he got right to this, he said, why have I come here? I've come here to teach you that we're all going to die. He didn't give them, a warm hug. No, I'm sorry to hear that. He was giving us the sauce, and this is serious. This is the most incredible thing about Maya. We know is that we see other people around us dying. Our relatives have died, but we think that we will never die. This is the most amazing thing about Maya. So in that regard, we're seeing more and more Prabhupada disciples leaving the planet. So for the last 32 years, I've been able to collect and record on videotape their histories, their oral histories, the time that they had with Srila Prabhupada. And so these are times that are in addition to Prabhupada giving class, Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita classes, but there were back. Okay, we're back. Thank you. So there were times when Prabhupada was on the planet, 11, how many years? 11, 12 years? Something like that. So there were these times where Prabhupada was on morning walks. He had darshans. So many instances where these Prabhupada disciples were able to be with him personally and get personal instructions from him that are not, these lessons that Prabhupada gave in these personal times are not necessarily in the Bhagavatam. They're not necessarily in the Bhagavad Gita. So how are we going to learn these lessons like the historians of Narottam Das Thakur and the six Goswamis are presenting these lessons that they learned from Lord Chaitanya? Even we go back to the Bible. These are stories that were recorded by Jesus' disciples to tell us what Jesus was like, what his qualities were. And these oral histories are also very important for us to learn more about Krishna consciousness and to know how Prabhupada was a Vaishnava, a perfect gentleman, from these anecdotes that I recorded for the last 32 years. So this will be the focus of today's class. So we're going to present it in two separate videos. Each one's about 29, 30 minutes long. And there are, I think I have 10 anecdotes in the first half and 10 anecdotes in the second half. So after the first half, we will ask for realizations that you might have and any stories that you find significant or something that you can apply in your life, something that you can relate to someone else that is not able to be here tonight or this morning. So while you hear these stories, we want you to focus on the lesson that is learned in that anecdote and any quality that is exhibited, that Prabhupada exhibited in that particular story that the devotee is telling us. So that you can, tell to someone else that has not been here. Shravanam Kirtanam Smaranam. The more you hear, the more you repeat it, the more you'll realize, and it'll fix in your heart the knowledge and the quality of Prabhupada, that he is someone that we can follow with ultimate faith. I'll just tell you, some people say, well, how did you join? I joined because, like everyone else did, in need of money, distressed, inquisitive, in search of knowledge. My particular circumstances are not important. But the first thing that I heard, and I'll just tell you the first thing that I heard from Prabhupada in person, after reading his books, was a Sunday feast lecture that Prabhupada gave in Dallas, Texas. And Prabhupada's lecture was about the importance of chanting Hare Krishna. He was dwelling on the significance of chanting the holy names. So after the lecture, they opened it up for questions and answers. And the first person, he raised his hand. He was about 10 feet in front of Prabhupada. And he was a little inimical. And he said, a little challenging, and he pointed right at Prabhupada. He said, what do you feel? What do you personally feel when you chant Hare Krishna? And without hesitation, within a heartbeat, Prabhupada said, and leaned back, I feel no fear. I feel no fear. So this is an example of a lesson that Prabhupada gave me at the time, and the way he spoke it with such conviction that it was undoubtedly the absolute truth. And without any mental machinations, I was realizing from my heart that not only was that the fact that if we chant Hare Krishna well, with attention, then we can also become fearless. That nothing can get in the way of our becoming happy. Vaikuntha, without fear. We can experience that in our life. Just from that one anecdote, just from that one example that Prabhupada gave, I feel no fear. So, without further ado, anyway, afterwards, so pay attention as the stories are being told to the lesson and the quality that is there, and then we'll stop after the first series, after 28 minutes, and then we'll open it up to some of your realizations and appreciations. Which story hit your heart? Which story is significant to you that stands out in your mind? All right? So maybe we can dim the lights.
thing that stands out the most in my mind of the classes that I heard was, for some reason, this vision of Srila Prabhupada sitting on the Vyasasana and referring to a painting which was just in front of him on a wall. The lotus feet of Krishna. And in the background you see the figures of the gopis sort of looking through the trees, looking on. And so Prabhupada was talking about that. stands out the most in my mind of the classes that I heard was, for some reason, this vision of Srila Prabhupada sitting on the Vyasasan and referring to a painting which was just in front of him on a wall. And it was a painting of Srimati Radharani offering tulsi leaves to the lotus feet of Krishna. And in the background you see the figures of the gopis sort of looking through the trees, looking on. And so Prabhupada was talking about that painting and how Srimati Radharani is serving Krishna. And the gopis are assisting Srimati Radharani in her service to Krishna. And other gopis are assisting those gopis. And Prabhupada raised his finger and he said, so this is our philosophy, that we are the servants of the servants of the servants. And the further down the line you go, the sweeter that service becomes. So I remember so vividly how Srila Prabhupada raised his finger, moved his finger down and said, the further down the line you go, the sweeter that service becomes.
The only thing was when I got initiated, he asked me, what are the 4 regulative principles and how many rounds do you chant, will you chant? And I told him the 4 regulative principles, and then I told him I would chant 16 rounds. And then he said, are you sure? And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And then he started laughing. And he said, I'm asking you if you are insured, because you have a spot on your face. I have a mole on my face here, and when I was younger it was darker. And he said, you have a spot on your face, and once there was a movie star with a spot on her face, and she had it insured for a lot of money. And then he just started laughing, and everyone was laughing. He was just chuckling, and then he said, Krishna consciousness is your only insurance.
Another time, I asked him, what do you think about psychotherapy? What do you think about analysis? And he said, oh, I have some appreciation for it. He said, one of my children came back from college and was tapped his forehead. He wasn't right in the head. And so at that time in Calcutta, there were 2 wings to the hospital. There was a British wing and a Hindu wing. And he said, I spent a lot of money sending my son to the British wing to get help from a therapist from England. And I asked him, did it work? And he said, for some time it did. He said he was, better, normal. And then he said, one day he left home and I never saw him again. So that kind of candid response to what might have been an impertinent question says to me that this was someone who had no guile. He was not hiding behind some kind of a facade of, Jagat Guru. He was a warm person who, if you asked him a question honestly and legitimately, he was there for you. He would answer your question.
Then the first time I actually got to see him was in Atlanta, where I had moved soon after reading that Back to Godhead. And he was only going to have a short layover in the Atlanta airport, maybe 2 hours, and so we didn't try to bring him to the temple, but the temple president, who was Balavanta Prabhu, and his wife Balavi, and Tara Dasi and Jamanjaya came up from Tallahassee, and we rented a VIP room at the airport, and I got to make a cushion for him because we didn't want him to have to sit directly on the, who knows how clean they were, the seats. And so I was very excited about that. And then when he finally came, I was just completely satisfied. This was the, just to catch a glimpse of him was the satisfaction of everything that I had hoped, but far more so. And so there were a few people that we had told he was coming, and as many people as could crowd into this one room, and some guests. And one of the most important things that I remember from that talk was there was an Indian man there who was not coming to the temple, but somehow the temple had figured out how to reach out to him and brought him to have darshan with Srila Prabhupada. But he was a scientist, and so Prabhupada was talking with him, just chatting, and he asked the man what kind of science, and he says, we do experimentation on animals. And I noticed that Prabhupada was very unplussed. He was just completely composed, and he said, what animals? And the man said, oh, cats mainly. And again, Prabhupada was just as cool as you could imagine, and he said, all the animals don't get a chance? And I could tell how he was very sarcastic, and I had never seen this in such a exalted person. I had never known that sarcasm could still be helpful to somebody. And you could see in the man, it just really helped him to be a little contemplative at least. This was amazing to me.
What I was talking to you before we started recording, I was mentioning how when I had jaundice or hepatitis, contagious, it's jaundice that you get from water, basically, or from contaminated food. But in India, it's not uncommon. And I had jaundice, and I went to Srila Prabhupada, and I said, Srila Prabhupada, I told him I had jaundice. I said, so what should I eat? And Srila Prabhupada said, only take Krishna prasadam. And I was just, oh, okay, Srila Prabhupada, fine, but what shouldn't I eat? And he said, don't take anything that's not Krishna prasadam. I just thought, that was like classic Prabhupada, kind of the way he could just answer in the most simple way. But what was there in that answer is Prabhupada's amazing wit. His extremely, dry sense of humor, but very, very deep humor. Like, I remember when we were walking in Vrindavan, and someone said to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, these devotees from Los Angeles, they're only taking Ekadasi preparations. And Srila Prabhupada said, oh, advancement. Like that. And then everyone crowded close to him. Advancement, Srila Prabhupada? And he said, yes. And then somebody was trying to play the pundit, says, but Srila Prabhupada, it says in the Bhagavad Gita that grains, let's see how it is, rains come from sacrifice, and grains are produced from rains, and all living entities subsist on food grains. And Srila Prabhupada said, his answer is, he said, very straight-faced, that is for those who are passing 7. So he said, that is for animals. And then, so everyone, that's amazing. So then, when Prabhupada got to Los Angeles, I wasn't there, but I heard the whole thing, and that Prabhupada had said about only animals, basically the summary is only animals need to take food grains. But I thought, Prabhupada's putting them on, and they don't know it. He's just completely playing with them, and they have no idea. And then he went to Los Angeles, and then they said, Srila Prabhupada, these persons, they only take Ekadasi preparations. It was the same references that happened in Vrindavan on the walk. And then Srila Prabhupada said, oh, why is that? And they said, and then they were shocked, and they said, but Srila Prabhupada, they say that only animals need to take food grains. And he said, I take food grains. Do I look like an animal? So, but I was so positive when I heard this incident, and I knew something of Srila Prabhupada. I think Prabhupada's playing with them. He's putting them on, and just in a very straight, way of speaking. They have no idea that he's joking with them. And I saw that. I saw Prabhupada's humor on many occasions, and it's not like a rowdy kind of humor. It's a very philosophical and almost like he could say this, and just very, very wonderful sense of humor. Extremely, charming, witty, everything, but you would not see it in a boisterous way.
Because what I had heard is that this one devotee had told me that he told Prabhupada that I was lazy. And so I was really brokenhearted, that I would think that Prabhupada would think I was lazy. Not that I'm not lazy, because now I know I am. But then I didn't feel like I was lazy. And I was really angry and also felt hopeless because there was just no way, that I was going to please Prabhupada or do anything right, at that point. So anyhow, Srila Prabhupada was there, and I went up to his desk. I had the courage. I mustered it up. And I said to Srila Prabhupada, I just folded my hands, and Prabhupada came up and smiled. And so I knew I could speak. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, and I got out a few words, and then I just started crying completely, like, whoa! I mean, it was deep crying, like I should have been in therapy or something, But Prabhupada sat there, and I was crying, Prabhupada, I'm a woman. There's no way I can please you. I'm a woman, and I have children, and they say I'm lazy now. And Srila Prabhupada, at that point, when he heard that, then I saw his arm go back, and he did this smile. It was like the universe or something. And when he did that smile, I just, oh my gosh, how could he think that was a smile thing, Because I was so sad. But that smile was like, he embraced me, with that smile. And then he said to me, he came close and he goes, are you reading my books? That's what he said to me. Are you reading my books? And I was reading his books, because that's one thing that moms can do, okay? And when you're breastfeeding, everything else, you could read books, okay? So I was reading, I was all the way up to the book that he was finished with, and at that time it was probably like 7th canto, 6th canto or something, 5th canto, I don't even know. But it wasn't very much. But the thing was I read them. And so I said to Prabhupada, yes, Srila Prabhupada, I am reading your books. And he said, then you are pleasing me. Yeah. And I mean, you could imagine, and I just was so grateful, and I just felt so much love. That's why I say the unconditional love changed my life.
Prabhupada was at that time translating the 6th canto, and he was in this section with Ajamil. Now, of course, nobody had a book yet on the 6th canto. It hadn't come out yet. He's working on it. But Prabhupada's part of his entourage, who he traveled with, apart from his servant, who was Shruti-Kruti, I think, he had this boy named Nitai. Prabhupada had 2 Sanskrit assistants, Pradyumna and Nitai, and they were both grihastas. They both had a child, so they couldn't do it all the time. They would take, one would go for a few months, and the other one would come and replace him, and he'd go back and spend, and then in this way it was a nice system. So this time, Nitai was the Sanskrit assistant. So he wrote the verse on the chalkboard so that we could all respond and chant it, as Prabhupada taught. And Prabhupada sitting on the Vyasasana. And then, after a while, men and women had chanted. Prabhupada told them translation. So he's the only one that has the translation because it's in manuscript form, you know. Prabhupada, he would get the tapes from Prabhupada's dictaphone and transcribe what Prabhupada had translated the night before. Then when they get that, they would then send that to the BBT. And this is how the process of making a book would evolve. So Prabhupada tells him, read the translation, and he has these papers. And he begins to read the translation to that one verse. And it is the part of the Bhagavatam when Ajamil sees the Yamadutas coming for him. So I'll paraphrase it because I don't know the exact thing, but in essence, you know, he's reading the translation. Ajamil seeing these Yamadutas, fierce-looking creatures, in fear, he calls out for his son. And he says, Narayan, Narayan, Narayan. We didn't think anything of it. It sounded appropriate. But Prabhupada caught it. And Prabhupada took the microphone and he said, did I say 3 times? And we realized Prabhupada's talking to Nitai, who is sitting down there from the other. Prabhupada said, did I say 3 times? And Nitai wouldn't answer. He just kind of bowing his head and he's not saying anything. Prabhupada asked him again, a second time, did I say 3 times? He's still not answering. And we realize there's something wrong here, something going on, but we don't know what it is. And then Prabhupada leaned back in his Vyasasana and he says, I did not say 3 times. So this is the 3rd time. At that point, Nitai confesses. He says, no, Prabhupada, you didn't say 3 times. And then Prabhupada said the most wonderful thing. He leaned forward in the Vyasasana and he said, why 3 times? Once is sufficient. And when he did that, you know, like his hand was like a mudra. Once is sufficient. The whole temple erupted. Hari Bol! He said it with such potency and conviction that, you know, once is sufficient. Once chanting. He said, why 3 times? And the whole thing made sense. And then Prabhupada showed a side of compassion, a side of him which is compassionate. He could have ripped into Nitai and blasted him, but he didn't. He just said, don't change anything that I have written. And that's all. And he went back and sat by and he gave the Bhagavatam class. And it was all about the glories of chanting the holy name. But that little incident there, I'll never forget it because it was a teaching moment, you know.
That same year, 74, I was married. I got Brahmin initiation because that was, Prabhupada actually stopped us from taking Brahmin initiation too soon. They had written a recommendation letter to Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, you are going too fast. So that was probably October. We had to do a Brahmin test. There was 10 questions, what the significance of the Guru. And then instead of being initiated 2nd in October, it was November. So then we got Brahmin initiation. And then we went in 76, we went to meet Srila Prabhupada again. And there was another wonderful realization for me after Srila Prabhupada installed Krishna Balaram deities in New Mayapur. Because it was like this, everyone was always visiting all the temples. Whenever Prabhupada would be in Europe, he'd be in France. All the devotees from Europe went to France. And at that time, Srila Prabhupada had been quite sick. But because Bhagavan was really begging to, please Prabhupada, you come, we have the deities to be installed. And so Prabhupada came, and there was three incidences. One was an amazing experience when Prabhupada was bathing the deities, Krishna and Balaram. And there might be a picture of this, but it's not a very well-known picture. Srila Prabhupada was first bathed with the big conch shells. He would bathe Lord Balaram, and then we had to bathe, and they were all about the same size. So they were like 3 instead of 2, Krishna and Balaram and Srila Prabhupada. So like friends. And then when Prabhupada had to bathe Krishna, he had to lean forward to bathe Krishna in front of Balaram, and he put his hand on Balaram's shoulder and then bathe Krishna like this. So when I saw this, I said, wow, this is spiritual world. They're the 3 friends together, Krishna and Balaram and Srila Prabhupada. Then a little later we had the big feast. Well, first we had the initiation again, 76, and I had one friend. She said, oh, how am I supposed to do? I said, you pay dandavats like this, and you say all these things, because I just had it myself. She said, are you sure? Because in those days we were not doing dandavats anymore. It wasn't allowed. I said, I'm sure I did it. You should do it. And when she did that, actually, I was looking at Prabhupada while she was paying her full dandavats in front of Prabhupada. And Prabhupada had this big smile on his face, and there was a picture made of that. So when she got up, I said, Prabhupada was very pleased.
So my service, 1974, I was basically taking care of the cows, but they had me bodyguard at Prabhupada's house from 9 o'clock at night till 4 in the morning, right? Gave me a shotgun, 38 pistol, you know. I'm standing in front of Prabhupada's house. It's ridiculous, you know, how can we protect Prabhupada? He's protecting us in every way. So I'm standing there in front of Prabhupada. In those days we call it rank and file devotees. You know, I wasn't a GBC, I wasn't a temple president, I wasn't a sannyasi, I was a bhakta, right? With 2 shoes that didn't match, you know. Hippie, penniless, not able or willing or desiring to go anywhere. But I'm in front of Prabhupada's house, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, Prabhupada's light would go on. And then I would hear him speak. First I thought he was listening to a Prabhupada tape. Then I realized, oh, that's Prabhupada. He's dictating. He's translating the Bhagavad 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm outside. I never talked to Prabhupada, you know. So I'm out there in front of the house, and it starts to rain a little bit. So going down on the side of the house, there's a driveway, and underneath the house there's a garage. So I went down, opened up the garage door, blah, 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 and I went standing in the garage door doing my guard duty. And I didn't know that Prabhupada could come down through the house to the garage, which he did. Oh, Prabhupada. Oh my God. I offered obeisances. I said, Prabhupada, how can I serve you? You know, what do you say? You know, here's Prabhupada. And Prabhupada is like a mountain. Stillness. His senses are not, you know, I think I told you that. I saw one video clip where somebody wanted to show me something on the clip, and they put it up fast forward, and there were all these devotees around, and they were all like this, and Prabhupada was just like this. So that's what the scene was like there. Prabhupada was like that mountain, and I was just like, you know, crazy, like which. So when I asked him, Prabhupada, how can I serve you? He went like this. You can go where I won't go. Can you hear his voice? You can go where I won't go. So Prabhupada had just flown from Tokyo to San Francisco to Los Angeles to Dallas to Chicago to New Orleans to New York to Pittsburgh, and then he was going back to New York and going to fly to London, go to India, and He was traveling all 1974, right? Meanwhile, I didn't have any means to go anywhere, you know. I said, Prabhupada, where won't you go? He said, to the future. I was like, what does he want me to build a time machine? He wants me to go to the future. How do you get to the future, you know? And then he said, and how you treat the people there, you show them how Krishna loves them. And I just went like this. I couldn't process what he just told me to do. Of course, it's an instruction for all of us. It's an instruction, go where I won't go, and how you treat the people there, show them how Krishna loves them. And while my eyes were closed, he left. He went back upstairs. When I opened my eyes, he was gone. That was it. He just laid that on me and split. You know, that's 47, 48 years ago. Okay.
I do remember one thing he said, that here in Los Angeles, many people go surfing. The devotees were talking about surfing, and then Prabhupada underneath his breath, because I was right there, and I could hear Prabhupada very clearly. And he was saying something underneath his breath, you know, and I'm like listening, you know, and he was like, suffer. So then, the devotees, the sannyasis that were there close, they said, Prabhupada, no, it's not suffers, it's surfers, Prabhupada, they're surfers. They're surfers, and they go in the water, you know, and they ride the board. And they were trying to explain this to Srila Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada said, yes, he said, and they will ride the waves just like the dolphins, and they go right through the waves just like the dolphins. So they are getting ready for their next body. And we all just laughed, and Prabhupada's little hands were all pink, and they were so beautiful, and we were just so blown away by his exuberance and his vision. He had such vision. And sometimes when you go to the airport, okay, they would complain. The employees, they would complain, you guys leave all these petals on the floor. We gotta, sweep them up. It's a big thing, you know. There's like 200 of you that come to the airport and got all these flower petals everywhere. Anyway, so they told Prabhupada that, right? And Prabhupada said, He said, so they are not complaining for all the cigarette butts on the floor, you know. And Prabhupada did so many things at the airport, you know. He would sit down waiting for his flight, and, you know, we'd be there, like, around him. And, you know, this lady that was there visiting our temple, she was a nurse, and she was, you know, a little eccentric. Anyway, she loved Prabhupada, so she was there, you know, seeing Prabhupada off. And so a few other sannyasis were sitting there on the airport bench, you know, with Srila Prabhupada waiting for the flight, and Prabhupada had his cane, and he was like this, you know, just waiting for us, looking around, you know. And then he was looking, he looked at the nurse, and then he looked at the devotees sitting on the chair, all the guys. He actually told them to leave so that this lady could sit down. Okay? Prabhupada was the perfect gentleman.
Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So those, I think, were 10 stories. Do we have the wireless microphone that we could pass around if need be? Hopefully. Just let me hear from two devotees in the crowd. Do you remember one story that was 30 minutes ago? How's your memory? Give me one story, except for this last one, that rings out to you that was significant, that you felt in your heart and you smiled or you got some realization. Rishi Kumar.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much for taking us back in time and keeping us there. Some wonderful memories. I personally had the good fortune of reading all 5 of your compilations of these memories, and eagerly await the 6th one. The one which stood out for me in my consciousness was, I think it was Yogeshwar Prabhu who said this point, that the farther you are in the line of the disciplic succession, the sweeter will be the service. So for me, that was a kind of a take-home point for me, and how Prabhupada really encouraged this. And the other point was Prabhupada himself mentioning about, will all the animals get a chance? So that was just, I found that quite amazing and extraordinarily sarcastic, pure Prabhupada. Thank you very much.
Very good. Yeah, the first story was Jagat Purush.
Jagat Purusha Prabhu, sorry.
Very good. Now, in oral histories, when I conduct these interviews, all these devotees, I'm not so focused on dates. We think history that it's got to be the exact date. And then if a person says, well, it was 1972, but it was really in 1971, to me is irrelevant. Because our memories can sometimes be shady and foggy a little bit, but the essence of the story, the purport, is there. Whether it occurred in one year than another, or whether it occurred in Chicago or LA, it's a nice kind of focus to have a setting for that story. But if you come up to that person and say, oh, I found out in the Vedic base that story actually took place in 1970, it wasn't 72, therefore the rest of your story is bogus. No. No. They're remembering these stories for the essence, for the purport, the lesson that Prabhupada taught us. The one that comes out for me was the grains, the grain story. But that was an interesting anecdote. So one other, how about a female devotee? Anybody in the back have a story that stood out for them? Can we get the microphone back here?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I remember that one, lazy. Can I tell that story or should I tell the grain story?
No. Which one stood out for you? I was just, talking off the top of my head.
So that Mataji, someone commented on her that she's lazy, and she said, I didn't feel that I'm lazy. So I felt, I was hurt, I was broken. So she said, I'm not pleasing Prabhupada. So how can I please Prabhupada? So she went in front of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was smiling. And then she got courage to tell, and she was crying in front of Prabhupada. But Prabhupada was smiling. And then Prabhupada said, are you reading my books? Then she said, yes, then you are pleasing me.
Right. That to me is probably one of the top 5 as a producer of this series. It's an excellent story, an excellent memory that when you're down and out or whatever, your connection to Prabhupada is there because hopefully you're reading his books. So, very significant anecdote. So, we have 30 minutes left, so let's finish with the second half of the presentation. And we can turn the lights down again. Is everybody able to see the screen okay? No matter where you are in the temple? And we have to thank Prashant Prabhu for facilitating. Let's give him a hand. So part 2.
Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Ite Namani.
I had a question in my mind about sickness and how we become sick. Do we become sick from karma? Do we become sick from our minds? Do we become sick from uncleanliness? How does sickness come upon us? And I hadn't been able to form it into a question, a question that I could actually ask Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada and I were walking along the big main street, and there's a church there called Christuskirche, And so we were walking along, and I was thinking about this while I was taking the walk with Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada stopped, and he turned to me and he said, 90% of all sickness is caused by the mind. And then off we went on our walk, continuing. So that's just something which I always remember. And in other classes that Srila Prabhupada has given, he's mentioned something about the effect of the mind on the body and the body on the mind. So the position of the mind we have to be very careful of, because it will affect the body. So at that time, Prabhupada explained to me that 90% of all sickness is caused by the mind. But another thing that's very instructive is that Srila Prabhupada actually read my mind. He knew what I was thinking about. And I didn't even ask the question. And he answered it right there. So that was very instructive to me, that spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, he read my mind. He knew what I was thinking about.
I actually used to hear many classes that we were always talking about, because Madhavisa really liked telling us about how even if we were a blade across, that we'd be eternally happy. And I was so despondent by that. I tried to keep very upbeat, but I was very despondent by that, thinking, wow, here I am in a human body, and I'm going to be stuck as a blade across for the rest of eternity. Yeah, not sure about that one. But anyway, Srila Prabhupada came to to Melbourne a couple of times when I was, after I joined. And in 1975, early in the year in 1975, he was actually giving different lectures. But because I joined when I had a little baby, well, I was pregnant, and my little baby Damodar was only young, around 2 years old, when I was going to the temple, actually living in the temple. I didn't get to many darshans, and I didn't get to as many classes because I had a child, or I had to sit right at the back and run out if there was any noise. But on this particular occasion in Melbourne, the mothers were sharing the money of the children, and Prabhupada was giving the class. And I was sitting at the back, just in case I had to run out, and Prabhupada was asked a question at the end of the lecture related to being what is our eternal form in the spiritual world. And Prabhupada said, and it felt like he looked straight at me at the back, seriously, it felt like he looked straight at me and said, in the spiritual world, everyone has human form, but if you want to be a flower for Krishna, you can be a flower. And I felt so relieved. I just thought, oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhupada.
Part of our thing was the In God We Trust Party for Purified Leaders. And for that, we were really talking about being part of the government, you know. And I said to Prabhupada that you really envision a time when devotees will run countries and command armies. And he said yes. And because he had been talking about this, eventually a war between the devotees and the demons. He had said, and I'm going back a little bit, the same conversation, he said, therefore there should be a war. He said, these wars where the demons fight the demons doesn't accomplish anything, because whoever wins is a demon. But he said, if you have a war and one side is devotees and the other side is demon, then that's Krishna consciousness. And so he was really talking about, you know, when we had the In God We Trust Party, he was thinking about what government does. And government is the rule of law. And so I had already been scared by some devotees. So I had a doubt. And so I was able to ask him, you envision a time when devotees will run countries and command armies? And he said, yes. So I said, then how in that circumstances can we be sure that we will become demons. He said, chant 16 rounds a day and follow the 4 regulative principles. And I said, and that's enough? And he said, yes, that's enough.
In Detroit, we were very fortunate that we were able to edit Srila Prabhupada's books. And I wrote Srila Prabhupada when I became pregnant with my son. And he wrote me such a kind letter back. And he said, I told him how I was going on Sankirtan full time. And he wrote me back. And he said, in the advanced stages of pregnancy, you should not travel by train or plane, and you should refrain from going on Sankirtan. And we would go for 8 hours a day in Detroit. And so I began editing Krishna book and also preparing prasadam for the devotees when they would return. And at that time also I was working on children's version of Sri Upanishad. And I sent Srila Prabhupada the first chapter. And he wrote me back and he said, for children, it must be very easily understood. He said, for example, how can they understand this term Brahmajyoti, which I had included? He said, you must say, instead of Brahmajyoti, you must say, just as there is sun, there is shine coming from the sun, so there is another shine coming from Krishna's body. That is Brahmajyoti. So he said, do this work very nicely.
We had invited some theology professors from the University of Frankfurt to see Prabhupada. So they came, professors, learned men, and Catholic theology, I think. So then Srila Prabhupada just began to preach to them about the very basic, the Aham Brahmasmi part, that you are not this body. There's spirit, soul, and this and that. So they listened for some time. And then at one point, one of the professors, he said, Swami, can we speak about some higher, spiritual principles like that? And then Prabhupada just said, so unless you understand the basics, what's the use of speaking of some higher spiritual? So he didn't care, to maybe cater to there and make a nice conversational impression. He would just tell them, and obviously you don't even understand what I've been explaining in the bodily concept of life, that there's a difference between the soul and the body, and you want to speak of some higher spiritual principles, which I think is an important instruction for all of us, for everybody. Sometimes devotees, they go or start to read certain things which are actually beyond their level of understanding. So you first do the basics. When you understand the basics, then you go to the next class. Not some student of mathematics who is already, or he just is learning that 2 and 2 is 4. Now he wants to understand algebra or some higher mathematics principles. No, you first do your studies of it. Then naturally you will come to the next level. So he was, and yeah, he was like that. He was could be quite strong on that.
So Prabhupada was very merciful. I remember that when I was at the lecture in which I was going to get initiated, we were very fatigued. We worked very hard. We ate a lot of prasadam. It was hard to focus sometimes, and I felt like I wasn't connecting properly, and I couldn't hear him. And so I called his name in the middle of the lecture. Prabhupada. People were looking at me, but Prabhupada also looked at me, and he wasn't upset. He just heard someone calling his name, and he turned to look at me, and I became peaceful because I knew he wasn't upset, and I was embarrassed, but I was desperate. And so at that moment, Prabhupada just stopped, looked at me for a second, calmed me down, and just kept speaking. I don't know what the other, I remember my temple president asked me later, what was that all about? I didn't answer. Because I didn't really know either. All I knew was that I was so frustrated and Prabhupada was so merciful. He didn't get angry that I disturbed his lecture. He felt my anxiety that I really wanted to hear him. So that's very merciful. He could pick up on the heart, huh?
While Prabhupada was staying in Juhu, of course, every morning he would go for his walk. Sometimes he would take a little ride, but usually he would just go right to the beach. It was a block away. So every day you could set your watch by Prabhupada, for the morning walk at the sunrise. So he'd come down the stairs, and of course he gets out the door, there's 20, 30 devotees there, which is a lot. They're all living there in Juhu. And everyone's offering obeisances down on the ground. But there was a young boy, and he was standing like this, just had his hands folded. And Prabhupada just kept walking, and he looked at me. He said, this is the beginning of his fall down. Just like that one item. And then he just walked on. So that's why I say it was always very important to never lose that focus of who you were dealing with, because it was easy, it wasn't a difficult thing. And of course, when you're with him, you would get to see it with yourself, and you could see it with others. And he would do his best to cure it. Prabhupada, so many times he called us into the room, tell us to, wake up, stop sleeping. He could have just ignored all of it, but he knew he had to keep us focused, especially being with him.
And one time I got to go to one of those darshans. It was with two priests. And one was an older priest, and I remember him being a very important person, maybe in the Archdiocese of Detroit. There's a lot of Catholics in Detroit. And then the other one was a younger priest, and I thought maybe it was his assistant or just a junior person, but still he was also a priest. And, they, out of politeness and interest, maybe they came to meet Prabhupada, and it was an interesting experience listening to Prabhupada exchange with them, because I could start to see how muddled their thinking was, especially the older priest. Like, he was talking in circles and not really saying much about his kind of understanding of God. And Prabhupada was speaking quite simply and clearly and trying to get it through. And at one point, it came out, well, I think Prabhupada used the word foolish. Like, foolish men who don't understand God, we will not be able to, put them in the top levels. And the priest, I think he misunderstood and thought the word foolish might have meant mentally deficient or something. And so in a sense, not understanding who you are in relation to God is a mental deficiency, but they had a little, so the priest got very defensive in a way, and he started saying, no, we work with the poor and the mentally handicapped, and he kept saying the word handicapped, and finally Prabhupada said, handicapped is handicapped. That's another matter. That's not what I'm talking about here. But the priest couldn't, he was in a loop, and he couldn't let it go. And Prabhupada started to say, if I cut off my hand, can you fix my hand? Can you do anything about it? And the priest was like, well, no. Well, that's what I'm telling you. Handicapped is a different thing. We'll discuss that later. But now we want to bring people to the level of God consciousness. And then he started to say how you can't really get there if you're eating meat, if you're killing animals. And I sat there listening to all of it, and I thought, I had this realization, I actually know more than these guys. And that was a big thing. I was a young girl, and I have a respect for elders, and I realized that they really didn't know that much. And it became really apparent the way Prabhupada interacted with them. And he wasn't demeaning them at all, but it was frustrating that they could not understand. The younger priest was a little bit better at understanding, actually. He sort of got it more. And in fact, he really, by the end, he was very enamored of Prabhupada. And I think I read in Hari Sari's diary maybe that somebody said to Prabhupada after they had left, something like that younger priest, he was ready to become your disciple. And Prabhupada said, yes, if you speak the truth, they will become your disciples. So that was pretty fabulous, that whole experience for me, hearing Prabhupada speak to other religious person like that. Because I think most of us who became devotees then had the experience that whatever religious path we had been raised in was not answering the questions for us. I think that was a kind of a universal theme of the 60s and 70s anyway. So there it was, like in real life, in real time.
Oh, another time in Los Angeles, the first time they played the Govinda prayers. First time in the history of Iskcon, I was there. And as Prabhupada entered the temple room, Vishnu John turned on the Govinda tape. And I used to always try and be behind Prabhupada's lotus feet so I could try and put my head at his lotus feet as he was offering his obeisances to each deity, to Gauri Tai, to Radha Rukmini, to Radha Krishna, and to Lord Jagannath. And then he'd go sit at the Vyasasan. So that day, I'll just never forget, because when he sat on the Vyasasan, he was feeling such ecstasy. And tears were like shooting from his eyes. And those of us who were sitting near at the bottom of the Vyasa, we were getting showered by Prabhupada's tears.
Literally.
Literally showered. You could feel his tears, shooting.
And Prabhupada would send us out on Vrajmandal Parikrama, but he himself wasn't going in those days. He went, I think it was 71 was when he went with the first devotees. I think it was 71. But by 75, he himself wasn't going. But I don't know if it was 75 or 76. We had gone out. Of course, there were ladies' buses and men's buses. And the ladies' bus had gotten broken down. And we were waiting in some Durga temple somewhere. And of course, they just left us. It was getting really late. I don't know how, it was dark. It was really late. Finally, Prabhupada missed us. And he sent some people out to get us. He was always caring for us. Yes.
One time, I got a little bit of donations, because we were really poor grihastas in those days, really poor. So $10 here, $10 there, and I bought a pair of golden yellowish rocking chair, a set of rocking chair cushions, one that goes on the seat and one that goes on the back, because Prabhupada had these cushions that were like foam rubber, like, I don't know, half an inch thick, and they were made nicely. They were covered with a blue cloth, but they were so thin. It was so thin. It gave no cushioning effect whatsoever. So I got went and got these cushions, I think at J.C. Penney's at the mall, and gave them to, I think it was Nanda Kumar at that point. Gave them to Nanda Kumar and said, Nanda Kumar, can you please slip these on? You know, sneak them onto Prabhupada's chair. So one morning when I met Prabhupada at, it was, I forget what it was called, the name of the bluffs, Santa Monica Bluffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean, that Hridayananda Maharaj found that place for us to go, because there was too much sand, too much of a beach for Prabhupada to walk. So he found this place, and Prabhupada said, this is the best place in Los Angeles for walking. So when I got to the car and I opened the door, Prabhupada swung his legs out and looked up at me and he said, so, the rolling rock covers you have supplied? Prabhupada called it a rolling rock, which was, never heard that before. And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, some of us donated to buy them. He said, thank you very much. And one thing that I noticed, I mean, wherever in the world I happened to be, by His grace, to be in the association of Srila Prabhupada, he always said, thank you. He always said, thank you very much. No matter the most seemingly insignificant, little, minute thing that you did for him, he always said, thank you very much. I don't know one thing, and I'm talking about dozens and dozens of situations. I don't know one time that Prabhupada did not say thank you to me. I mean, kid from New Jersey, you know, and Prabhupada, every single thing, everything, in letters and in person, every little thing he said. I mean, one time we gave Prabhupada a $108 check, and he wrote, thank you very much for your gift. I mean, it's $108. It's like offering a drop of water to the ocean. And he said, thank you very much. So it was never, to me it seemed, it was never a burden. It was never too much. You were never imposing on Prabhupada and, you know, forcing him to say thank you. He said it, what do you say, genuinely? I mean, it was amazing to me that he always said thank you. And most of the time, thank you very much.
One time I was supposed to have a darshan with Srila Prabhupada, and my son Arjuna was, how old, maybe 4 or 5 months old at the most. And so this was the second visit after I was pregnant. So yes, so he was little, and I was holding him, and I was supposed to go in to have a darshan with Srila Prabhupada, and my son dirtied his diaper, so I couldn't go in, you know. So I was holding him, and he started crying, you know, my son started crying, and Prabhupada walked by, and he said, just like the child is only happy in the arms of the mother, similarly, we are only happy when we're in the arms of Lord Krishna. So kind.
So on one occasion, we were just returning from the morning walk. We were nearing the temple. Dr. Patel was walking and having animated conversations with Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada was saying something critical about one of the well-known, you know, figures of the recent history. And Prabhupada was quite critical. And Dr. Patel, as he had done many times, really objected strongly to Srila Prabhupada's criticism. And he was asking Prabhupada, why do you have to criticize? Let them be. You do your thing, let them do their thing. Just leave them alone. Why do you have to criticize them? They are great souls in their own right. So let them just be. If you don't agree with their philosophy, just let them alone. And then Srila Prabhupada stopped. And Prabhupada said that if I'm in an operating room and I'm conducting a operation with a patient, and someone comes into the room and starts cutting my patient, am I going to just stand there and watch it happen? No. I'm going to say, get out! Prabhupada said loudly, get out, you rascal! So I cannot be silent. These rascals and fools have destroyed the culture of India, and therefore I must speak out, and I will speak out. Prabhupada is very, very strong.
The young men, even in those days, 1966, 67, 68, they were saying women shouldn't give classes because they're less intelligent. So Govindadasi happened to have been one of Prabhupada's personal servants at that time, she and her husband Gursundar. So I asked her to ask Prabhupada for me, is it true that women can't advance as quickly as men? And I was feeling depressed. So Prabhupada told her to tell me, yes, if you think you're a woman, how can you make any advancement? And when one of the brahmacharis wrote to Prabhupada that I shouldn't be giving classes because we were all equal, and many girls were giving classes in those days, Kanchan Bala, Leela Sukha, myself. And so one of the brahmacharis wrote to Prabhupada and said, this is not right. So Prabhupada said, he quoted the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Lord Chaitanya said, Kiba Vipra, Kiba Nyasi, Sudra Keninai, whether one is a sannyasi or a brahmana or anything, if he knows the science of Krishna, then he can be a teacher of Krishna consciousness. And even if you think that women are less intelligent, still everyone should be given a chance to speak.
The quality that Prabhupada exhibited that impressed me most readily was his compassion, his compassionate nature. I saw how he would look at compassionately to how he dealt with some of his disciples who had strayed or fallen away, and they come back, and he would receive them with love and compassion. We had never seen that. In fact, just to illustrate, I remember one little incident. I had gone to San Francisco from New Dwarka. It was the first Rath Yatra I had been to, the first real Rath Yatra. Because in New York, they used to have a little mini festival in Central Park. When I came to New Dwarka, they weren't having Rath Yatras in LA. But San Francisco would have the big Rath Yatra, Golden Gate Park, and the whole community would go down to San Francisco in caravan, and bus, and cars, and everything. And we got there the day before Rath Yatra, and that evening Prabhupada was coming into San Francisco airport. And a bunch of devotees went to the airport to greet him. As I said, Prabhupada coming into an airport, that meant a festival. There'd be kirtan, everything. And I was there. At that time, I was leading the kirtans. I don't know who was, somebody else was. But there were sannyasis, Vishnu Jan Maharaj was there. There were many people who were there. And as Prabhupada was making his way through the crowd, through the aisle, suddenly he stopped. And he looked to his right, he looked across the room, in the airport. He looked across, and I was on his left side, and I tried to follow his gaze, wonder, what's he looking at? And I traced it, and he was looking at one young man. I didn't realize that that young man was a devotee, was a disciple of Prabhupada. He was a young man with hair, and he had come out. He had heard from the other devotees, Prabhupada's going to be here, and he came to see him. Prabhupada stopped and looked at him, and he just stopped walking. And his look was just eyes of compassion and love. And he stretched out his hand, and he said, he did like this, motioning for him to come. And that boy came, and he walked through the line, and Prabhupada took off one of his garlands. He had many. Put it around him, and the exchange was one of love. It was so real, Prabhupada had affection. And this boy had left maybe years before. But Prabhupada was so happy to see him. He gave him the garland, and then he continued walking. So that was a little thing, but seeing that compassion and that affection in action, that was touching, So that's something he always, we read that the Vaishnavas are full of compassion. He doesn't even want to see, he doesn't want to see an animal been hurt or killed. What to speak of a devotee or a disciple? He was so compassionate.
So in one of the lectures I was in at Honolulu, Srila Prabhupada was speaking, and he must have been speaking about pride and how it's not a good thing for people to be proud. But then he said, but to be proud of being the most confidential servitor of Krishna, that is spiritual. And I thought, did he really say that? And then he said it again. So, you see him in his pictures sometimes with his head so high, holding his cane, and that's why. Because he feels himself the most confidential servitor of Krishna.
Then Pushta Krishna asked Prabhupada, will we recognize you in the spiritual world when we arrive? And he said, yes, you will recognize me. He had previously said, we will have big Iskcon in the spiritual world. He said, that is my role, that when you return back home, back to Godhead, the spiritual master will take your hand and put your hand in Krishna's hand and make the introduction. So that's an eternal position that he has. We are eternally related to Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So we're going to stop there as the morning is getting on. But I thank all of you for staying and listening so attentively. I want to thank His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami for allowing me to come. Mohan Rupa Prabhu for allowing me to speak. Rishi Kumar for facilitating me here. Sankalp Nityananda Prabhu, Nanda Gopal Jivan Prabhu, who does have the memory books if anyone wants to read these stories. Prashant Prabhu for his facilitating the video today. Gadadhar Hare for being such a nice helper while I'm here. And there'll be another program tonight, or
afternoon, and tonight will be in the auditorium.
In the auditorium at 7 o'clock. And we'll focus on one of the qualities of Prabhupada, a perfect gentleman. And today we'll focus on how Prabhupada is merciful, taking from the memory series examples in real life, how Prabhupada exhibited that quality of being merciful. And one last shameless promotion, if you want to inquire any bit more about the memories series in a video or book form, etc., just try to remember PrabhupadaMemories.com. Can we all say that together?
PrabhupadaMemories.com.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद इस ग्रेट सिद्धांत प्रभु का. हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. Extremely grateful, eminently thankful His Grace Siddhanta Prabhu for having arranged this wonderful opportunity for us to bathe in Srila Prabhupada's pastimes. You could maybe go ahead and be at the stall so you can have the book session. Yeah. So आज आप सबके लिए विशेष सूचना ये है कि सब भक्तों के लिए हमेशा की तरह अतिथि भक्तों का प्रसाद की व्यवस्था की गई है फूड फॉर लाइफ प्लाजा एरिया के समीप. आज anybody remembers who's the afternoon lecture? Today Sunday feast lecture will be delivered by His Grace Lakshmi Narasimha Prabhu. तो उस पर भी भाग ले सकते हैं. हमारे जितने आप में से कितने हैं जो पहले